I don't know why I was doing that.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight I'm proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater. We'll be focusing on retro sci-fi and horror cinema. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you, sir?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. There's a lot of good things happening. It seems like all of a sudden everything that was on hold for the pandemic is now no longer on hold. So despite the economic situation, there are opportunities abounding right now. So that's good.
You know what? I'm experiencing something similar here, as a matter of fact.
I'm very glad.
Yeah, there's all kinds. Much has been made about a gig economy, in news over the last 5 or 10 years, but it really is.
Definitely it is a geek. I've worked conventional employment for most of my career because I've been in education and working in hospitals and other institutions. And this is very much a gig economy, like for the most part, for most people. And there's still a lot of things you don't know and that are difficult to figure out. But still, that's part of the adventure, I guess. And it'll change by the time we figure it out.
It will. Anyway, tonight, what I wanted to talk about was sort of the antithesis, I guess, of what some people in cult horror film fandom call hag horror. The movies back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, some in the 80s as well, that featured actresses who were, once big named actresses. They were A-list. But they'd gotten older and parts had gotten scarcer, and they agreed to be in horror films. Things like Joan Crawford in Straight Jacket, Betsy Palmer in Friday the 13th. I love Betsy Palmer. I've got a signed photograph of hers, I believe.
Awesome.
From the 1950s. It wasn't her with a knife or anything like that. Although I would have loved one. She wasn't real fond of. I think it took her a while to accept the fact that she'd been in this movie, and it kind of brought her a whole new legion of fans that she wasn't really expecting. I think I'm sure she embraced it after a while because, hey, a fan's a fan, and cult horror fans spend money, especially when you're doing the autograph conventions and things. So cater to that audience, Betsy. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. But what I wanted to talk about was the antithesis of that, which is, you called it geezer horror, and we're going to run with that.
Okay.
Which are movies starring horror films, sci-fi films starring actors who might have been, very handsome at one time, or maybe quite skilled. Especially the first one I'm going to talk about, William Marshall, who was a Shakespearean actor who starred in a couple of big horror films in the early 1970s. People like Rory Calhoun, very handsome in his day, primarily Western actor. He did quite a few Westerns. He did some horror films, and just some kitschy films in general, in the 70s and 80s. But he seemed to have a good attitude about it. I seem to roll with it. Even actors like Neville Brand and Mel Ferrer, made these films. Stuart Whitman, oh gosh, he had a whole career out of them. I can't tell you how many horror films Stuart Whitman was in the 70s and 80s. John Saxon, did some as well. All of these people were they're actors. They've got to support themselves. They've got to make money, and after the studio contracts went away, you had to figure out a way to support yourself. And horror films are usually pretty inexpensive to produce. If you had somewhat of a name, you could talk a horror producer into a not bad fee, depending on what your name was, and that would help sell the film. So it made sense to especially in the 70s when they were cranking out, some great horror films, low budget ones, but great horror films left and right. And that's sort of my era too. That's when I, really came to love horror films, was in the 70s.
Me too.
but there's some great ones from that. Night of the Lepus. I think it's 1972. Janet Leigh's in it. Stuart Whitman and Rory Calhoun. Interestingly, the first one I wanted to talk about, though, is one of my favorites. It's considered a what they used to call blaxploitation film, called Blackula.
Oh, one of my favorites.
With William Marshall, who was an incredibly well trained actor, a Shakespearean actor, famous for his stage performances. But we know him today primarily because he did some really interesting offbeat film and television roles over the years, and seemed to approach them with the same seriousness that he did Shakespeare. And I find that really interesting. And that's probably one of the things that stands out for me about Blackula, is that it could have really gone awry. And there's some scenes in it now that today would not fly, but in the early 70s, it was fun. So you kind of have to understand what things were like 50 years ago as opposed to now. And there have been some big changes. At least I've noticed them. I hope you have too.
Oh, definitely. We live in a different world now, entertainment wise.
Oh, it is. It's very different. But I still think that there's so much to enjoy about the film. For one thing, he's a really good vampire. He is an excellent. He's got all the charm, all the sophistication. It's very easy, to believe. And in the film, several of the female cast members are attracted to him because he's a very handsome guy, older, middle-aged, distinguished, very handsome, debonair, had quite a bit of charm, and he makes the movie. He really sells it. His performance alone, and if they hadn't gotten somebody with that kind of talent, that movie would have been horrible. But as a matter of, it's not, because he's awesome in it. He does a great job, and I love. I guess I don't know if this was direction that was given to him or whether this was his decision, but playing it rigidly straight was the best thing to do. With that kind of content, you can't even really wink at the screen. You have to play it seriously in order to make it believable and to be happy about your work. There are times when it's fun to do parody, but I just think that William Marshall was awesome. And I was a big fan of Pee-wee's Playhouse in the 1980s, and he was the king of cartoons on Pee-wee's Playhouse. And I look forward to seeing him every Saturday. He made a sequel to this film as well, which was called Scream, Blackula, Scream. And it's okay, but for how I am, for me, the original is the best. I always like the first one, with a few exceptions. I like the first movie the best. There are a few exceptions to that rule, though.
Yeah, I loved the first Blackula. It remains one of my favorite horror movies of the era. And I remember Athena and I had been hunting for it. We finally found, I believe, both Blackula movies on one disc. So it was like a great treasure. And in Living Color, the comedy show, used to do good spoofs of the
They did.
blaxploitation films, as they were called. I believe they did Blackenstein too, and a few other Universal
That does seem. I loved it in Living Color, and that does seem familiar. Gosh, you knew that was more than 30 years ago. I just can't believe it. Oh, I just where does the time go? Anyway,
to another show.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot of these, whereas the hag horror seems to have started maybe a little earlier, or like I said, the 1960s was really the heyday for a lot of that. Geezer horror doesn't really seem to come into its own until the 70s, but when it does, I mean, it's everywhere. Ray Milland, how many horror films did he do? And there again, a great actor, approached every role seriously, capable of turning in just brilliant performances he did, the the thing with two heads, and yeah.
I remember that.
But Ray needed a job. He had to pay. He's in Frogs, which is one of my favorite low budget exploitation horror films with a great cast, by the way, from the early '70s. Spenguli on MeTV shows Frogs every now and then. Really interesting film. But I've got to say, I'm going to jump out of sequence here for a
Okay.
minute. Something inspired me with this topic tonight, and it's because I purchased and downloaded a movie that I had heard about but never seen from the late 1980s called Blood Harvest. And I downloaded it as a RiffTrax. I'd never heard of it, was not on my radar. And I guess the biggest thing to note about Blood Harvest is that Tiny Tim is the star of it. From the late '60s, Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Yes, yes. Now I have to track that down.
He married Miss Vicky on the Tonight Show. They had a daughter who actually, their daughter lives probably within an hour's drive of where I live. She lives in southwestern Pennsylvania. Interestingly, I don't know how she got there, but
invite her on the show.
Well, maybe we should. But I wanted to see it. It sounded really interesting when I was reading the plot synopsis, and it was shot by a director whose movies I've seen on a number of occasions. His name is Bill Rebane, and Bill Rebane's done a lot of really terrible movies like Monster a Go-Go, which has got to be one of the worst films I've ever seen. He did The Giant Spider Invasion with Barbara Hale, Della Street from Perry Mason, Steve Brody, Barbara Hale's husband, Bill Williams, who was a Western actor, is in it as well. Alan, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. The skipper from Gilligan's Island,
Okay.
Alan Hale Jr. It's got a really interesting cast in it. And Leslie Parrish, beautiful actors from the '60s, still beautiful in The Giant Spider Invasion. It's got a really interesting cast, and he seemed to want to make films in Wisconsin, where he was from. So almost all of his films are set and made in like a small town in Wisconsin. Interestingly enough,
it's like Troma. Troma used to. They had the fictional town of Tromaville.
yes, but this isn't fictional. This is the upper.
It's a real town. Okay.
Anyway, that's where Blood Harvest was shot. Bill Rebane was able to meet Tiny Tim because Tiny Tim had come to the town where Bill Rebane lives and shoots all of his movies. I cannot remember the name of it, the town that is. And he saw a live performance and asked Tiny Tim if he wanted to make a movie, and Tiny Tim said yes. It's horror films are great exposure for people. They typically pay pretty well, and I gotta say, Tiny Tim is excellent in this. I can't imagine anybody else in the role, and he's working with a lot of community theater actors, but he does a really good job at it, and he's supposed to be creepy in it, and he wears like clown makeup. I don't want to throw out too many spoilers, but he regularly wears clown makeup. His character does, and after a while, after you see him on the screen so much in clown makeup, it sort of normalizes it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was thinking about that. I was watching the film, and I was like, that's kind of weird. I'm actually so used to seeing him in the makeup that when you see him out of it now,
It's so strange. Yes.
yeah, it did. It was like, whoa, now I don't trust your character so much because, well, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I recommend it. It's a fun, low budget horror film, beginning to end. It's not a bad movie either. It's actually a pretty good little film, and very interesting. And like I said, Tiny Tim delivers the performance that only he could do. And he hits his marks, he knows his lines, and he's supposed to be kind of sort of he's supposed to be a creepy character, but not necessarily malevolent. If that makes any sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. But he's not window dressing either. He's integral to the plot. So, but I can't really say much more than that because that would give it away. And I don't want I don't want to dole out any spoilers. I would like for anybody who's interested to pick up a movie and take a look at it. I think it's a lot of fun. It was made in 1987. And it's sort of what sparked this interest. Now I know that Tiny Tim was not an actor. His music was his claim to fame. But he was sort of a personality. Maybe that's a better way to put it. A personality.
Mm-hmm.
Because you remember, like back in the early 70s, he had one song, but he was on
everywhere. Yes.
Yeah,
he was on Laughing. He was on all the talk shows.
Right. Yeah. He was everywhere. And I dare say probably some game shows here or there. But he was just a personality. And in the 80s, I guess it got tough, and why not, and he's really good at it too. And I think it's worth watching. And like I said, I'm a fan of Bill Rebane movies. Some of his films I think it's one of his better films in terms of just the quality, the overall quality of the movies. But the Giant Spider Invasion is one of my favorite horrible campy movies. It's got a really good cast. And Barbara Hale is she's the star of it. It's her movie. And she does a very nice job. It doesn't seem to be the slightest bit embarrassed that Steve Brody rolls over her. They're tumbling down a hill. There again, you'd have to see it. And the giant spiders, some of them are Volkswagens, Beetles, with junk. With junk.
Oh, very cool.
It's a blast, and it's 90 minutes of fun. It really is. And it's interesting to see some of the older actors who come through in it. One of the bits on Svengoolie that I watch every Saturday night, and it looks like I have frozen.
Yes, you have.
Oh well. We'll see if we can't get through it.
Okay.
Anyway, one of the bits on Svengoolie is Svengoolie will dole out some interesting information, some trivia about some of the actors in each week's films. And there's this running gag where he will talk about the actors who have been in Perry Mason. And if you've ever watched Perry Mason, every actor from the 30s to the 60s rolls through there. People on their way up, people on their way down. Everybody was in at least one episode of it. And that movie is sort of like that in a way. I mean, it's just interesting to see, some of the, they're not cameos. I mean, these people have fairly sizable roles in the film. But it's just interesting to see them, in an ensemble cast. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. But anyway, pick up if you can find a copy of The Brood. I didn't check YouTube. There could be one there. I figure there probably is. Everything seems to be on YouTube.
I don't know if I've asked you. Have you been told about Tubi yet? TUBI?
I've heard a lot of people in our age bracket talk about Tubi a lot. And you know what? I haven't checked it out yet. It's one of the apps on our TVs. I don't, to tell you, interestingly, I don't watch much television, so I haven't seen it. But I know that they run a lot of public domain stuff on Tubi.
Yes, and horror movies I've never heard of.
Yes, I've heard that
Some of them
too.
quite old, and they have classics like Last Tango in Paris, Uncut. They have like a lot of movies ranging from low budget, unknown horror movies to really like important classics that you don't really think about. Like I haven't thought about Last Tango in Paris since I saw it way way back in the day in the theater. But there it was with some other films that I remember from way back then.
Weren't you a little young for that movie? That movie was kind of racy, wasn't
I had a mustache and a beard when I was 11.
it?
And again, they were
But they didn't card you anyway.
no,
You know,
never.
if you could reach, the person at the window with your money, you could go in.
You could go.
It's,
Now they card me if I want to get cough medicine. It's just like,
I know, isn't that
look at
crazy?
me. Do I look, do I look like I'm underage?
Right at the start of the pandemic, I went to Target and I thought, well, you didn't know, and I went out and stupidly panic bought just like everybody else did on the planet. But I wanted to get some NyQuil and stuff like that
Yeah,
in case we did get really sick. And I like to be completely passed out when I'm sick. I don't want to have any memory of it.
uh-huh.
So if I get a cold or the flu, I'm just sort of out for about 4 days because I keep doing shots of NyQuil and then whiskey, and I just you pass out. But the rest really helps. It gets you through it so much faster.
Yes. And that was it too. We wouldn't get NyQuil because NyQuil works, and
Yeah, I know, but the cashier was acting like, are you making meth or something? I was like, no, I just need 4 bottles of NyQuil. And I got the big, economy.
yeah. We got the double economy size ones.
I don't know if they thought I was going to make scissor or what.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you buy the cold medicine and stuff, yeah, they'll card you. And I bought liquor when I was a teenager. And,
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I'm not saying that it was right or good or anything, to do that, but golly, I mean, what a and everything. There's all this surveillance now. I am so glad I'm not a kid these days. I would have
Yeah.
hated.
But back in the 70s, it was a different world. Even the movies, I'm watching some of these movies from way back then that I remember vaguely having seen either by myself or with my cousin. It's like, I cannot believe, you can't get away with making movies like this anymore. Some of the content is unbelievable with our
Something
eyes today.
something that I've gotten into recently are made for TV horror films. I've run some
Uh-huh.
as movies of the week because in the early days of the late 60s, early 70s ABC movie of the week, they didn't copyright. So they're public domain,
Hmm.
which is just unfathomable. I don't know why they did that. So, and there's good copies of them, of a lot of them around. And I've been finding some real gems out there. I watched, and then this is one I've run a number of times over the years, but it's called Moon of the Wolf. I watched that
Hmm.
just the other night with several actors who were, I hate to use the word washed up because I've experienced so much ageism lately that and it
I have
sounds
experienced it
derogatory. It
too.
just, huh?
I've experienced it too, even when I was focused on my earlier careers and I was known. I was on PBS, on a show and everything, but still, they look at my age and all of a sudden the conversation would not be as positive and enthusiastic as it was.
I went to an employee retreat back in December. Um, and I won't say any more about it than that. I want to be purposefully vague. And they gave us this book of things to sort of for the future. And one of the questions in it was, where do you see yourself in 30 years? And I looked at the people at my table and I said, dead. I mean, 30 years? I mean, come on.
Uh,
Right. And there was nobody at my table who's going to be alive in 30 years unless they become French nuns. I just
well, if you filled it out now, you could write acting in low budget horror movies.
very true. But I just thought, well, this is for a new professional. This isn't for everybody in the room, and there aren't that many new professionals in the room. I was like, why is this here? Who wrote this? And that's a funny minor point. I mean, unfortunately experienced much worse than that. But what do you do? You can call it out, but does it do any good? No, it doesn't.
There are a lot of, I'm finding, we talked about the gig economy. I don't know if it was on the air or off the air, but the gig economy allows for a lot more opportunities for folks like us who are, older, because we have a work ethic. We're reliable, responsible. We started working when we were kids, and for the most part, continued throughout the course of our lifetime. And that's worth a lot to people, because people who were not raised in that type of world are not as, I guess, conditioned to play the employment game.
I mean, I hear that all the time from some people, and I also hear from some employers that they like hiring older workers for some of the reasons you just cited. It's just it's a topic for another time, really.
Another show, yeah.
And it's not a fun topic either. I'd rather talk about being a washed up old actor instead of being washed up in some other aspect of my life. One of my favorites, and I've got pages for a lot of these actors at the drive-in. Unfortunately, we talked about William Marshall. I don't have a page for him, but I do have pages for Stuart Whitman, who was in such horror films as Ruby, which is a Piper Laurie. So you could almost consider that hag horror, although I would never consider Piper Laurie a beautiful, talented actress to be a hag. But she was actually, to tell you the truth, that was probably the prime of her career. I think that's when she was most successful, was when she wasn't an ingenue anymore, and had really worked on being a good actress, interestingly. But Stuart Whitman, this certainly was the downside of his career, although he acted frequently. He made a lot of horror films in the 70s. Night of the Lepus, like I said, was one of them.
I remember that too.
And Rory Calhoun, I have a page for him. Great Western actor who did horror in the 70s. And before we started recording tonight, you and I were talking about one of my favorite horror films, which is called Motel Hell.
Yes.
It's I love the sign in it too. This isn't really much of a spoiler, but the neon O in hello is burned out. So instead of reading Motel Hello, it's Motel Hell. And it is a blast. Rory Calhoun he's clearly having a good time in it. He's bought into it. He's enjoying it. He's enjoying the role a lot. It is a blast to watch. And Chuck Connors, whom I also have a page for at the drive-in, was no stranger to movies like this too. And he's in a movie that some people tend to confuse with Motel Hell, which is called Tourist Trap.
That rings bells. I probably saw it a long time ago.
Well, they came out roughly around the same time, and I think that's why people get them confused. And I can't really say that the plots are a little, I guess, somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
And enough so that if you tried to tell somebody what it was about, this old actor ends up killing people. You know what I mean? I guess it could be that generic, but a lot of fun. And if you're a Bond fan or a Charlie's Angels fan, Tanya Roberts is one of the victims of the antagonist or protagonist, depending on how you look at it, in Tourist Trap. Chuck Connors is awesome in it. He there again seems to be enjoying the role. He's really creepy, and he does a good job at conveying just how evil and creepy he could possibly be. He's really good at it, very effective, good actor too. He did a lot of he did such a variety of work over the course of his career. Everybody loves him for the Western TV shows that he did. And I'm trying to remember what the one he did. What was the late 50s one that he did with Johnny Crawford?
Drawing a blank.
Yeah, I am too. And I don't even have IMDb up, so I can't even look for it. But he was in Branded in the 60s. That's kind of the one I'm thinking of at the moment. Did some he was a baseball player once upon a time. I think he played basketball once upon a time as well before he got into acting. And came to Hollywood close to the end of the studio system. So he, speaking of gig economies, he went out, got his own, got jobs. He had, family to support, had to make money. And he did things like Hot Rod Girl with Laurie Nelson, which it's a really good, fun public domain movie. And Laurie Nelson is just so watchable, fun actress to see. And Chuck Connors, he has a straight role in it, but he did quite a few horror films over the years, oftentimes as the antagonist. He wasn't afraid to, not be the good guy, and he's really good at being the bad guy. So he might as well play to your strengths. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Comic books changed the dynamic of the quote unquote geezer movie with Old Man, like Old Man Logan, and the movie Logan came out where in fact the Professor X and Wolverine were old men, and clearly the heroes and television, like with Picard now on Star Trek, where he's in his 80s, I believe, and his adventure continues. So there is a reaction to this ageism, and the classification is like playing bit roles in horror movies. Now they're playing starring roles in like science fiction, and I'm reminded, did you see City Slickers with Billy Crystal, that movie?
And Jack Palance.
Jack Palance, yeah, he's another one who more youthful. He was a hero or a villain in films that he played in, but here he played like a Marlboro Man cowboy, and it wasn't a starring role, but it was a pivotal role, and
he got all the best lines in that movie. And he was there again, he was in some movies of really questionable quality over the course of his career.
Yes,
but he's always good in them. And I bet I've seen 90% of his output. I've seen a lot of Jack Palance films over the years. And he never rolls his eyes at the screen or anything. He comes in and does it. He's capable of some really strong performances.
Yes.
Especially like Man in the Attic, which is a fantastic movie. He did some great work over the course of his career, and there was much ado in the press when he was in City Slickers, late 80s, early 90s, whenever that came out. And I think his performance not to say Billy Crystal was a very talented actor. He does comedy very well, but Jack Palance just blew him out of the water.
and his advice was good. And as I get older, I appreciate his advice more and more. That basically toward the latter part of life, find already what you love. So pick one of those things that you love and do that. I don't remember if that's the exact wording, but that remained with me, and I find that it's true. And
Yes.
I found opportunities doing very unlikely things, that I really felt passionate about and still feel passionately about. So it was good advice.
No, it's excellent advice. It's just a reminder that life is short, and everything has a purpose. Everyone has a purpose. And just because you're, getting on in years doesn't mean you can't grow and can't learn.
Right.
In fact, we've had to do so much that over the years, we're pretty good at it.
Yes, we are.
And it doesn't hurt to help to know a little bit of history,
Mhm.
in order to avoid, making more mistakes. It just helps after you deal so many times with a certain situation or a certain unreasonable person. It just becomes natural.
And I'm glad now that with our entertainment, there are more visual audio platforms than just movies. And TV is experiencing a renaissance now. I think you pointed that out a while back on one of the shows. And now anybody with a $20 camera and a USB connection can make productions.
And
So
I think that that's like one of the most exciting things, about now, is that you can, heck, you can put on, you can be the Little Rascals, you can put on a show, you can do it yourself, and you can make it look good.
mhm.
You just have to have some time and patience and some skills. You don't need a whole lot of money.
No, not anymore.
Especially if you have access to the software you need. Now, if you have to buy the software, yeah, you're going to need a little bit of money for that. But it's just amazing what you can do now. The things that 25 years ago would have cost a fortune, in terms of the quality of the image and the sound, is just sort of expected, from your iPhone.
And even the show with its limited production values, we can record it and it could be available to the planet within like a few hours after it's recorded.
Limited production values.
Well, I don't have intros. I don't have music opening and closing the show. I don't have special effects. I have, basically we each have a camera and we're recording and um,
Well, I did spend like $20 on the green screen,
there you go.
and I got to tell you, I fully intend to redo it very soon. But the backgrounds, I think I did that in Photoshop in about 5 minutes. The whole thing. It's a direct lift from the website. I didn't change a thing. I didn't go back and get the originals or anything. I just, oh,
And
here,
it looks
I'm done.
fantastic. I'm thinking
Yeah,
of having the Roman temple of Hercules Invictus because there is one in Rome. It's one of the oldest temples in the Roman Empire. And I'm thinking of putting that in my background. So that's what I'm going to have back there.
do you have a green screen?
Yes, my wife got me a green screen. We haven't used it. It's still in the box, but I do
Mhm.
green screen.
Yeah, I bought mine, I think, oh gosh, right around the start of the pandemic, because I was on Zoom constantly,
Uh-huh.
and teaching, online as well. And I wanted to, since a lot of new opportunities, that first year or so of the pandemic, everything was done, via Zoom or Teams.
Hmm.
And I wanted to give them some instruction on, how to look professional, not not doing that myself, but you know what I mean. How to interview for a job,
You
things
look
like that.
iconic, so you're
Oh,
still
I got
professional.
this. I got this for Christmas. I love it. It's I married a monster from outer space.
Awesome.
It's a nice shirt too. Anyhow, as I kind of lost my train of thought there. We were talking about the something I discovered pretty recently, which were made for TV films. There's a lot of, and there were a lot of made for TV horror films in the 70s.
Yes.
And I'd watched Moon of the Wolf just a few days ago with Barbara Rush, David Jansen, and Bradford Dillman, who turned up in practically every Quinn Martin production, every 70s, 80s TV movie. He was in a couple of series on his own, but the series didn't go anywhere. But gosh, did he star in a pile of 70s movies. Um, he was his second or third wife. It was his final wife. Let's put it that way. It was the model Susie Parker, beautiful, supermodel from the 50s. Probably the best known, model from the 50s. And they got together, and I think they had. I think he had kids and she had kids, and I think they had a child maybe. But she was an actress too. She did some horror films in the 60s, did some things like that. But he was the one who appeared in, like I said, practically every television film, every Quinn Martin production. I mean, he was probably on them once a year. Just an interesting, ubiquitous presence, and a good actor too. And it's a fun movie, and it's also public domain. I ran it a little over a month ago when it was Barbara Rush's birthday. And since it's public domain, I think it's the only thing that she did that I can find. It's public domain. So every December 4th or whenever it is, I don't quote me on that. When it's her birthday, I run Move the Wolf. And it's fun. It's really not a bad little 75-minute way to spend time. And some of the horror is actually okay.
Yeah, the TV movies, they vary in quality, but they've been getting better, and series have been getting better. And if I start proceeding along that road, we'll get off topic again. So I won't. But they are getting better, and I'm enjoying binge watching with Athena horror movies that are both old and very new while I'm working out first thing before bed. So we've been getting our fill of movies lately.
Well, we've been trying to watch one. Let's say two movies on the weekends. I'm just not. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I have trouble sitting there watching something for an extended amount of time. I feel like I need to be doing something.
That's why I work out while I'm watching.
Well,
Same
yeah,
thing.
I wondered, if that wasn't sort of a similar impulse, So it's kind of hard. Greg always complains that, why don't you sit down and watch a movie with me? I'm like, because I got 10,000 things to do. Yeah, but he's right. I mean, you have to turn it off, at some point. And I find it hard to do. To just sort of shut down and enjoy something. But I've been able to do that lately, and I've been trying to catch up. I'm way behind on my movie watching, and there's so many titles. It's impossible to see everything you really want to see. I mean, who would have the time for it?
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of cinema to watch on my bucket list. And there's some things that I haven't seen. And here's a movie that I stumbled upon that I haven't seen, but it fits the bill here. It's called The Tenant.
The Tenant?
Yes, Greg thinks that he has seen it. I have not seen it. It's a Roman Polanski movie. In that, not only, I mean, he stars in the movie. Interestingly, we always think of him as directed Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown. But he's in this movie, and it really sort of falls in line with a lot of his other films. If you watch, and I'm sure you've seen Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, years ago, but yes,
Okay.
I saw it.
But you're familiar enough with the, it takes place.
Story, yeah.
Takes place in New York City. John Cassavetes is an actor. His career isn't going as well as it might. He and Mia Farrow live beside Ruth Gordon, and I can't remember the actor's name. That's a shame. Oh, anyway, and it's just an interesting film, and he also did a movie called Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve that I love her films, and she's really good at this.
Hmm.
She's very twisted psychologically, and it's a really good film. But whenever he watches films, Roman Polanski seems to have this inherent fear of metro areas or metropolis. I don't know how we would call
City,
it metrophobia. I don't maybe that's what
maybe.
you call it. He has a fear of the city, and see, I'm the exact opposite. I have a fear, even though I live in a rural area. Maybe that's why I have a fear of it. I fear more rural areas. I'm more of a deliverance, fear kind of person. But he seems to his fear is generated by the city and I guess the closeness and the crowds.
Hmm.
And this is that kind of that movie. So a really interesting cast too. Isabelle Adjani, the model turned French actress. Melvin Douglas is in it, interestingly, and Jo Van Fleet, great actress on her own as well. And Roman Polanski moves into an apartment where a woman has passed away, and his kind of reasonings and musings for what happened to her sort of start taking over him, and he begins to lose his marbles.
And he meets some people.
Yes, yeah. And it sounds great. I want to know. I want to watch this film. I want to see more of it, and I want to see his acting style. I mean, I've seen a few things that he's been in, like The Fearless Vampire Killers, but that's that's a cute movie, but it's tongue in cheek, and you can't really judge somebody's acting chops. And directors actually should be the world's best actors, if you think about it, because they have to be able to convey to the actor how they see this character's emotions, what this character should be doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know.
And indeed, some, especially actors of yesterday, or I should say directors of yesterday, were fantastic actors on their own. And I'd like to see his work. Just be interesting to see how he does it. And I kind of get the feeling just from what I have seen him in that he might even underplay it a little bit. I'm thinking it could be pretty subtle, because thinking of the films that he's done, especially the horror films. They build. There's a progression. There's a trajectory to them. It doesn't just start. He builds up to it. He's very good at that sort of thing. And the plot of this movie sounds like it just sounds like his MO, his modus operandi.
There were sequels to it, I believe. At least one sequel that I could remember. I don't think they were as good, but I know that there was at least one sequel to Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I saw that speaking of TV movies, I saw that when I was a kid. It was Patty Duke.
Oh, okay.
And I think I only saw it when I was a kid. I've only seen it once, but I can still remember how it opens. Oddly enough, I think they're on a like a Greyhound bus, and Patty Duke. Just funny how you remember something you saw close to 50 years ago. And I mean, I like Patty Duke as an actress, but as I recall, I was disappointed that it wasn't Mia Farrow, because she'd been in the original and I'd seen the
Yes.
original, by then. And seeing that, it was like, well, okay, it's Patty Duke, I'll buy into it. But I was kind of disappointed, in that aspect of it. That's one thing I hate about sequels, is that when you start changing the cast around, it's like, it's not what I was expecting.
No. We're after 10. Do you want to continue, or do you want to wrap up for today and move on?
Well, I wanted to talk about one more actor.
Awesome.
And he's a favorite of one of my favorites. I know you saw him a lot in 60s and 70s television. If you ever watched Rat Patrol, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Christopher George.
Yes.
Handsome actor from the 60s who did gobs of television. Not too long before he passed away, he and his wife, Linda Day George, did some horror films. One of probably my favorite horror film is the one I wanted to talk about the most, and it's called Pieces. It's supposed to take place in Boston, and I think they did some exterior shots in Boston, but the rest of it shot in Madrid. So it's kind of they do a pretty good job at keeping it together, but it is it's an unusual way to look at it. Edmund Purdom is another actor who is in it, who is also his career is on its way down. Christopher George did, like I said, toward the end of his career, did several horror films, and he had a heart issue. He was in an accident on the set of Rat Patrol, and he suffered some heart damage from it. And I think it, unbeknownst to him at the time. And by the time that his heart condition was diagnosed, it was a little too late for him. He died. Like poor Lisa Marie Presley, did something.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah, and so young. Yeah, I'm older than she was. And to just, I mean, I hate to say it, I had a friend, an older friend, who said, well, he said, that's the way you want to go. And I think I understand where he was coming from, but
Still, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a big downer.
Let's end on a happier note.
Yeah, well, here's my happy note. How about this?
Okay.
I have completed the transition of all of the actor pages and almost all of the other pages at the drive-in. There are a couple of exceptions. I still have not unveiled my design for the front page. I'm thinking about saving that for the 1st February, because that'll be the 25th anniversary. I might just roll that out then.
Let's plan a celebration. Let's invite people, and we'll do like an everyone will be in the Zoom meeting, and we could all share how Brian's Drive-In Theater has affected our lives. I think it'd be great, and I'm sure you have people you can invite. And I know people that are hosts on our other Sword and Sandal Cinema shows that would most likely want to participate. I'll ask around in the bodybuilding film community where we have guests every now and then. Let's make it an event. I mean, you should be celebrated. That is quite an accomplishment. You created a cultural institution that has touched people globally, and that deserves recognition, and it certainly deserves celebration.
Well, thank you for that. I got to tell you, it's been a short 25 years. Doesn't seem like that long ago at all. I just can't believe it. It's been that long. Yeah, I'm going to roll out the remaining changes, except for the front page, here in the next couple of days. The only section that I have to do are the obituaries, and I think there's only 8 pages, and I'm trying to make a couple of content decisions. I think I just made one, to tell you the truth.
Good.
And once I make those decisions, I can just go ahead and roll out the rest of it.
Well, I'm looking forward to all the changes. I'm looking forward to the completion and further evolution, because you'll never really stop. Brian, I'm honored to be your friend. I'm honored to be working with you. And what do you call it? I really enjoy talking to you.
Well, I enjoy our talks as well, Hercules. Thank you.
Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you very soon. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. I think I found the button to stop the recording and then have some minutes on. Let's see if I can accomplish that. If not, thanks again, Brian.
Okay. Thank you.